Hi, everyone. Welcome to NJGAAE Presents. Today, we are with David and Julia, and we will be talking about the New Jersey drama speech. Oh my gosh, I always mess it up because I'm from New Jersey Drama and Forensics League. So enough of me. I'm going to pass it to Julia, and then I'm going to pass it to David.
Hello, I'm Julia. I'm also an employee with Arts Ed New Jersey. I'm the Programs and Marketing Assistant. And back in the day, I was a member of the NJSDL, New Jersey Speech and Debate League. And we're here today with the president of the NJSDL, Mr. Yastremski. If you want to take it away.
Sure. My name is David Yastremski. I am the coach at Ridge High School in Somerset County of New Jersey. I was the president of the NJSDL for many years, stepped away into the vice president role. And then this year with the pandemic and moving everything online, I took over the role once again, just because we had to do a lot of work on the technical side to redefine what speech and debate competition looked like for our students in New Jersey. So I'm back in the role along with some amazing coaches in our league as well, who have really been committed to promoting speech and debate competition for all the students throughout the state, as well as neighboring states.
Awesome. So as we normally do, I'm going to ask you about you, and then we're going to get more into what NJSDL is, because I'm very curious on how it functions, because I have no idea. So the first question is, because I sent them to you ahead of time, what impact did or does arts education have on your life? Are you an arts teacher? Do you remember an arts teacher from your past that you think about?
Well, it's interesting because whenever I interact with folks, they say, oh, you must have done speech and debate when you were in high school. And my high school did not have anything like speech and debate. Where I went to high school in Pennsylvania, we didn't even have AP classes at the high school that I went to. So you either went into the athletics, you went into community service organizations, or you went into the arts. And I was not made for athletics at all. So I found a home primarily in the community service organizations, Key Club, Lions, Leo Club, which is a division of the Lions Club, Student Council. And I also did, I was also involved with a little bit of band, a little bit of choir, but I was also involved in the school musicals as well. So I was a product of arts education. It really defined my entire secondary school experience. And when I went to college, that is where I became familiar with speech and debate competition. And it was simply a speech professor who said, does anybody want to try some extra credit? And I said, sure, because what college student doesn't?
Yeah, who am I to pass that up?
So I went and started participating in collegiate speech activities. And then I ended up doing debate for a little bit as well. And that brought me to graduate school, where I started coaching actually a high school in southwestern Kentucky. And that was Callaway County High School under Larry England, who is still one of my most amazing mentors, a legend in the activity. And he was the one that really introduced me to high school speech and debate. So while I really embraced arts education as a student myself, it really wasn't until I was in the world as a coach that I really found myself immersed into the power of this activity and what it offers students.
That's really cool. I know that Julia has, when she was on the stream, when we first introduced you to the NJGAAE world, I remember her telling stories of her time with you guys and it being very, very impactful and it being very important. So with that, this has a big effect on young artists, and I want what is some words of wisdom you have for young artists?
I think most importantly, and I teach English and language arts primarily at Ridge High School, although I have assisted with the drama productions. I have assisted with the newspaper over my career, but I've really been focused in on the speech and debate team. And within that world, my main goal is find your avenue and push those doors open anytime that you can, anywhere that you can. Because in this day and age, particularly in this Zoom COVID world, we really have to do what we can as educators to ensure that we open the doors for our students to be able to express themselves, to be able to find what motivates them. And in arts education, we may not be on stages anymore, and we may not be in the orchestra anymore. But it's so important for us to still maintain any semblance of performance that we can, whether it's in a digital world, which will eventually come back to the real world. So it's really an exciting time, because what I also think is it's this generation of arts student that is going to completely redefine the trajectory of arts education moving forward because of this experience. I talk to my students all the time about, oh, what a downer, as in your junior and your senior year, that, we're living in this masked world, and we're doing productions in masks and in Zoom windows and everything else. And my goal to all of them is, you're redefining what arts is. We have opened the doors of access. We have given young people everywhere a new medium to be able to express themselves artistically. And now it's going to be the charge of those folks who have really baptized this new endeavor to take it even further, even beyond what any of us old people that have been in it for too long could ever imagine.
Absolutely. When everything was first closing down, something that I really was hoping would happen is we would have like a revolution. We would have this renaissance of artistic design and artistic power, and I'm seeing the connection, and I've been doing this stream forever, and I say this almost every week because it is such a prevalent theme that arts creates connection, and it's just so important. And so in this time, that is something that inspires me. What is something that inspires you?
What inspires me is seeing my students, as well as students from all across the state, sort of really endure all of the negative press that is being attributed to this generation and this experience. Everybody is talking about how people are not learning, and experience is really being held back. But when I see what our students are capable of doing, even in this digital environment, it really does motivate me to continue stretching my imagination as an artist myself, to provide more opportunities, to provide different types of access. Because it's really, for an educator, it's really about enabling all of those voices out there and giving them a space, which is going to hopefully not only move arts education forward, but our society in general. Because it's this generation, folks like yourself, who are the renaissance, and who will continue to redefine, rebuild, regenerate the arts movement in completely and brand new ways.
Absolutely. There's something to the innate power of storytelling, and that's what arts gives us. No matter what field you're in, you are telling a story, you are imparting an emotion, and that is so valuable. So continue.
And I also, even in this environment, one of the things about speech and debate competition, and people say, well, how is it different from theater or other types of activities? And in honesty, it's the role of the audience. Mm-hmm. Because in speech and debate competition, every room is different, every judge is different, every audience is different, and our students learn how to adapt as in not only their performance, but in their speeches and in their material, their literature pieces, that it is flexible, it is living, it is something which you're constantly customizing. And that's one of the best skills. So for years, for decades, our speech and debate competition has looked the same. It's been a bunch of kids piling into a cafeteria, then going into classrooms and presenting, in front of a judge and some of their peers. And maybe eventually they'll get into a final round in front of a larger audience or an auditorium even. But in this world, the role of the audience, even though they are, a little green dot maybe at the top of your screen, completely brings out an entirely new type of communicator, an entirely different way of performing. So it's important that we still promote that element of the role of the audience, even though we may not see them, even though we may not encounter them or feel them, their role is still just as important as ever.
Absolutely. So with that, actually, anyone in the audience, please add questions to this. We would love to answer your questions. I'm sure David would love to answer your questions. So kind of closing down the discussion of your career, what is something that you are so proud of? I know there's tons, I imagine.
Well, every day there's pride when I walk into the school and when I engage with students, even in Zoom. And it's always, for me, it's that first time that a freshman gets it or a first-year competitor feels, and you could see it in their eyes and you see it in their excitement. And, when we go typically in the speech and debate world, we travel, all over the country, actually. This particular weekend, the second weekend of February, is always one of our biggest tournament weekends. And it is still this year. Right now, there's a gigantic speech and debate tournament going on through the University of Pennsylvania. And a lot of students from New Jersey and Pennsylvania and the nearby areas and across the country are all in hundreds and hundreds of Zoom rooms debating and speaking, and they're going to be doing it all weekend long. So even in this environment where we're not on the campus and, in hotels and going into, some of the most hallowed classrooms of academia, just to see our first years get so excited about what we do and how they're growing and involving themselves in it, that every single weekend is another proudest moment of my career. I've been honored to work with a phenomenal team in a phenomenal school district that has earned a lot of acclaim with state championship titles and national championship titles. But many times it's that one student who has a hard time speaking up in class that all of a sudden finds their voice and decides they want to share it with an audience, and to see them go through that process, those are the proudest moments of my career.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, I love hearing how theater and how speech and how debate and how every layer of communication with an audience affects a person, because it really is, you're speaking, you're having a one-on-one connection with a group of hundreds, thousands of people every single time. And if you're doing it right, then that person will feel that connection. Every person will feel that connection. And it's just so valuable. Absolutely. So with that, I would really love to learn about what NJSDL is.
Very good. You got it. The New Jersey Speech and Debate League used to be known as the New Jersey Forensic League, and it's associated with the National Speech and Debate Association. And really what the NJSDL is a group of teams across the state who gather together on weekends and compete in one of three particular genres. There is the public address categories, which looks like public speaking. Even within public address, we have what's called limited preparation events, which are you find out your topic when you go to the tournament or you walk into the room with the judge. You also have the memorized public address events, original oratory or informative speaking. We have interpretation categories. And those categories can be scripted, where you actually are holding the book, giving recognition to the literature that you are performing. And then there's the memorized events, dramatic interpretation, humorous interpretation, duo interpretation, where students are fully able to utilize not only their vocal expression, their facial expression, but also with some restrictions, nonverbal expression, in order to bring a particular scene or a story to life. And then we have our debate events. And there are a myriad of debate events, everything from one-on-one debate called Lincoln Douglas to team debate, which is policy debate or public forum debate or parliamentary debate and congressional debate. But debate is just exactly what it sounds like. It's a group of students going into a room, debating the affirmative or the negative or the pro and the con of a resolution, and a controversial subject many times. And at the end of the day, in that room, a judge has to decide who conveyed the truth of the resolution or against it the best. So it's a competitive experience, which I know some people, always question, what is the educational value of competition? But I think, and Julia can even attest to this, and I'm sure you can too, Jocelyn, there is an element of community within that competitive space that not only nurtures us as individual performers and competitors, but really, I think, builds up our tenacity, our durability, our focus, because we are ready and willing to put ourselves out in that public stage and learn from it and grow from it and improve ourselves because of it. And then that extends into all walks of life that anybody may find themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, I have this philosophy where life is improv. And so it should typically be yes and. And so you're always growing with each other. Of course, have your limits, but not with improv. But it's always the growing and the continuing and understanding and learning each other. And that's really what this seems to value. And I really value that.
Yeah, speaking to the sense of community that you mentioned, Mr. Y, I really think that even more so than competing in speech was one of the most defining moments of my entire time in high school. I was from a really small school, and being able to really connect with people over a shared interest and, competition on a national level, that shaped my personality even. I'm always going to be so grateful for what the activity gave me in that respect.
It's a magical opportunity where a student who goes through all of the chaos and the trials of young adulthood, all of a sudden can make connections with other students from Florida, from California, from Texas, and you go to these grand tournaments, and all of a sudden you may not have seen them for months, but all of a sudden you're best friends again in a room where you're actually competing against one another. And it's really this interesting tension of the competition versus the social connection that really makes an event like speech and debate competition so unique, but so personal, and most importantly, so valuable to that experience.
Definitely. This is a question that is a genuine question from me. Through the 4 years that I did speech and debate in high school, I never knew why it was called forensics. And I was wondering if you knew why.
Sure. Most and it's funny because usually I get that question from the parents of our first and second year students, because when they hear forensics, they're thinking, CSI, they're thinking about science.
When I pitch NJDFL to when we're doing fairs or whatever, I'm like, and not the forensics you may think. And then it always leads into what you're about to say.
Well, I always say we came first because Aristotle actually coined the term forensic speaking as one of the 3 types of public oratory. There's epidictic speaking, which is speaking in sort of ceremonial speaking in praise or blame of another. There is deliberative speaking, which is based on policy. And then there's forensic speaking, which is what he constituted as legal speaking. And the idea is using your voice to convey truth and utilizing evidence in order to share a persuasive message. So regardless on which of the genre you may be actually participating in on a competitive level, the end of the day is to share with an audience member your truth, whether it's the truth about a particular debate topic, or whether it's your truth about a particular public speaking topic, or whether it is the truth that you're conveying through a narrative performance. At the end of the day, within the forensic competitive world, it's about the message. And that message is what connects that speaker to the audience, like we mentioned before. So it goes back to Aristotle in his work, The Rhetoric. So whenever folks bring it up, I'm like, we came first. They stole it from us.
I feel like I spent most of high school with like maybe half my class thinking that I was doing detective competition.
One of the very first tournaments I ever attended, we stopped at a McDonald's on the way home, and we were all there, and somebody asked, what were you doing? I said, oh, we were at a forensics tournament, and they literally turned pale white because they thought we had like dissection competition going on. It's like oppositional autopsy. Let's go. But once we clarified it, they were able to finish their meal.
I would love to comment on the share your truth. That's such a beautiful statement. And it always brings me back to one of the like competitions, one of the like activities, I forget the actual word for it, that you can compete in. We have 12, but one of them is called impromptu. And we get a quote from whenever, wherever. It doesn't even have to be from a person. It can be like, even though musicals are from a person, it can be from a musical or a play or whatever. And then we have to do a speech about it. And that is when I see people's truths probably the most out of all the competitions, because I see how their brains connect. Because you can see it. You get a speech, you get a quote about how history has affected fatherhood, and then you go into a whole speech about the interconnections of it, and you avoid talking about your father, or you talk a lot about your father, and that can give parts of your truth, and that can give parts of you. And I think that's so valuable. And the forensics part of speech has always been my favorite because of that. And I now have a statement as to why, because it's sharing people's truths.
It is, and it doesn't matter which event you're in, although, of course, public address, by the sheer nature that you are writing the speech or creating the words right on the spot with an event like impromptu speaking, everything is a story. A debate case and your defense of that case is a story. It's about how you think and how you evaluate and how you analyze, and how should we judge the merits of a particular topic or resolution. And the same thing, within the world of interpretation. There's some amazing, whenever I teach this, I always say, it's very profound that when we think about forensic speaking, we think about the different ways that truths are connected. And I always use the example of, we could hear a debate that on the problem of drunk driving in our society and why it's horrible and what needs to be done to stop it. We can hear a speech where someone is citing, Mothers Against Drunk Driving and other statistics about the problem in society. Or we can hear someone deliver the words of someone who has been personally affected. And each one of those taps into a different part of the human condition and the human experience. And each of those is so equally persuasive and pervasive in the way that it allows us an opportunity to be transparent, to show ourselves, to share something about it, even though it may be the words of someone else or the studies that someone else produced. At the end of the day, the fact that I'm in that space and I am sharing those ideas, I now own them and they are become part of me. And that power becomes so monumental, because I always challenge the students in my class, how many times do you have an audience giving you 10 minutes of uninterrupted attention to listen, to hear your words? It doesn't happen at the dinner table. We're always interrupted. It doesn't happen when we're on on our phones or on the computer. To have that moment and that opportunity is something that really is precious today. because we as a society just don't spend the time to sit and share and listen for that period of time.
Absolutely. So that brings up a question, which I'm very curious on what both of your go-to is for debate, because mine is immediately pathos. Immediately, like full stop, I go to pathos immediately, and then I have to back it up and go, oh, I need facts. So I'm very curious on what your go-to is for debate, and then what you advise students when they're trying to find their go-to, or they're trying to understand each of them and understand what connects with an audience.
Well, it's interesting that you bring it up, because you think about today's headlines and you think about how are people making decisions about what is true and what is right in life today. And to a certain degree, unfortunately, it has veered a little bit to the pathos, where people are not listening to the data or listening to the statistics or evaluating the facts as they present themselves. And that's one of the amazing things about this activity, particularly in debate. When you come to a tournament, you have to be ready to argue both sides of a resolution. And I have always said, when I just had a student recently come to me and say, I'm going to find that rather difficult. And I say, you shouldn't. Because when you can successfully argue the opposite side of a topic, that either A, permeates your position, because now you fully understand not only the issue, but the evidence, the logic behind it, and the different layers of analysis that can be evaluated. But number two, maybe especially for young people, maybe it does cause you to start questioning some things that maybe you've accepted because you've been told to accept it, or you've been programmed that this is the way you should think. Debate does so many amazing things, as do the other two genres, to really allow our own students the ability to question themselves, which solidifies the idea that it's not just about the emotion. It has to be about facts. It has to be about sourcing. It has to be about credibility. It has to be about logic. And when you bring all of that together, that's when a student can truly say, you know what, I now have an opinion, and this is why.
Before we move to what Julia has to say, because I can see it, I can see your ideas starting. I would love to comment about the connection aspect. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and I asked him how he came to his conclusions about his beliefs, and he said, I just kind of keep on thinking about them and calculating them and conversing with my notebook about them. And I thought that was so fascinating, because for me, how I do it is I start with these base beliefs, and I think, okay, let's find why I believe this. Let's find evidence behind it. Let's find and support it. And how I do that is I go out and I interact with people, and I understand their value sets, and I understand this person's value sets and that person's value sets, and I always find them valuable, but I take what I personally find valuable versus the overarching value of them, and incorporate that to myself, so that I can have as fleshed out of beliefs as I possibly can. And I think it's so interesting that everyone has different ways of communicating and coming to conclusions. And so that's why I was very curious about how you both engage with this debate topic, because everyone is so different, but also so similar in such an interesting way.
Oh, yeah. It's funny that you said that you thought I had something on the tip of my tongue, because I'm not a debater unless you count with my dad at the dinner table.
That is 90% of society. Our debates are at the dinner table. And Julia, I can pretty much guarantee that your experience in the speech events helped you become much more eloquent, much more confident. Maybe sometimes our parents are like, the answer, because I'm the parent, that's why, doesn't necessarily work with students from our communities. But it really, that idea of utilizing your voice and having the confidence to have that position, that's where those dinner table debates become much more than just shouting matches, because we're trained. We now have a sense of what is my idea, what is my perspective, and how am I going to, for this moment in this time, convince that person on the other side of the dinner table that I may not completely persuade them I'm right and they're wrong, but my goal at the dinner table might be just listen. And if I can get them to just listen, then I've done my job. And that's where this activity really, really provides our young people that confidence and that understanding that I may not always win the round, but as long as I've gotten an audience member, and it may not be the judge, it may be the person sitting on the other side of the room that was just there to observe their brother or their sister that day. If I got them to think about what my idea was an hour after the round, then I've done my job. If I've gotten that audience member to go home and talk about it with another family member, I've done my job. And maybe, a year later, that person goes back to my speech, my debate, my performance, say, you know what? That was such an amazing message that I've changed my way of thinking. Then we've done our job. As a coach, that's all I could ask for my students. And for our students, it's not about the trophy. It's about that one person whom you changed their lives, their perspective, just by a simple 10-minute presentation.
You're planting a seed.
That's it.
Yeah. That
is absolutely it. We're there. I don't know if I could do this easily, but our logo for this year is Change Lives.
Fantastic.
That's what it's all about. Whether it's a debate round, a speech round, an interpretation round, it's about speaking our truth, and hopefully the ripple effect that tree will grow. We'll go through every cliche metaphor we can right now, but that's why we do what we do.
So I have another question. So would you say that is one of the most misunderstood parts of debate? Like, have you gotten students who have entered in and been like, I'm going to win everything. I'm going to win constantly. And then how do you gauge that? How do you say that's not necessarily what we're here for? We're here for what you just said, planting the seeds.
They learned very, very quickly in this activity. And I know Julia can attest to this as well, that no matter how good you think you are, there's somebody who's better. No matter how much you prepared for that competition, there's someone who's prepared more, or in some cases, just had a better day than you did. Whenever I meet with the parents of our first year students, I always say, you know what? This is an activity where your child is going to learn to lose, because our entire community are young people who want to share that message, to do better. And yeah, no matter, you may have straight A's in school up to that point in time, but now you're going up against other people who also have straight A's for the very first time. And it's a place where you learned very quickly that it's not about the win. I mean, I could probably, I don't know how they handle awards for the NJDFL, but my guess is, Julia, where are your trophies these days?
Well, I don't have they're in my room that I still sleep in.
All right, very good. At the end of the day, they're plastic.
Yes.
And if I asked her right now, what were your scores for that one red trophy sitting on the room, from the tournament at Randolph, I doubt she would be able to tell you what her ranks were, but she could probably talk to you about some of the people that she met that day and the experience she had.
100%. Also, to explain a little bit, I have tried to move them to the basement, but it makes my dad too sad.
All right, so we can actually blame that then on your dad.
My poor dad. I feel like you've just been attacking him.
refusing to give up, relinquish your youth. But it's, you can't go into this activity expecting to win all the time, because you're going to learn very quickly at the end of a tournament. We host two very large tournaments at our school every year, and they tend to be some of the largest tournaments in the entire state, where we have 1,000 people, and even more sometimes. And in every event, there may be, I think there might be 160 debaters. Only one of them is going to walk away the winner. All the rest of them are losers. So when it happens, it's great, but you lose more than you win in our activity. And that teaches you that it's not just about that trophy. It is really about the next week. And that's something we always say. It's not about how you did this week. It's about whether you're going to get back on the bus when we're in person next week, or back into that Zoom room the following week, because that's where your success is going to be measured at the end.
It gives perspective, which I think is very valuable, especially right now, with just everything going on, and then also my generation. Like, I love us, where I'm part of them, but it is very valuable to learn that you're not always gonna win, and that's okay, and that's very important, because life is not a winning game; it's a experience game.
Absolutely, and they get reminded of that every single weekend. And sometimes it's in the hallowed halls of Harvard and University of Pennsylvania, like this weekend, or sometimes it's at Randolph, or any of the other schools that participate in the activity.
Yeah, truthfully, I think that the experience and the sense of community, and even learning things from other people's performances and other people's speeches, that really makes the activity what it is, more than any, trophy on the shelf.
Easily. Yep. Especially in this environment,
Yeah, speaking of which, I know you've mentioned the way tournaments have transitioned online this year because of the pandemic. Would you like to speak a little more about what that's been like?
Oh, yes. It's been a whirlwind. Right from last March, when all of a sudden the entire country started locking down, speech and debate really kept going. We did have a few canceled events, but we were already at the end of our season in 2020, and we still participated in our national championships. There's a few national championships out there, and depending on the team, you tend to gravitate towards 1, 2, 3. Not really many of them do all 4, but the majority of those national championships still occurred because the activity was ready for it. Even years preceding the pandemic, we saw a very large growing debate program coming out of Asia and China. And they already created an online platform for students to debate across the Atlantic. Similarly, Alaska has been doing online speech and debate for years because the state is so big. Let's face it, some of those schools only have 2 hours of daylight at different times of the year, or it's 50 degrees below zero. So we already had infrastructure in place. So when over the summer, we got through last year, and then over the summer there was a lot of development and discussion about, okay, how are we going to start this off in the new school year? So right at the beginning, at the end of August and September, tournaments started, and they have been going nonstop. A couple of the major impacts that online tournaments have really offered many of our students. Number one is greater access. There are different states that oversee speech and debate in the same way that they oversee athletics. There are very defined seasons and very strict rules over when and where students compete. So now that they're at home, some of these states we're now able to really branch out and be able to compete at tournaments that they would never otherwise have been able to compete at. The second thing is just the travel expense is not there anymore. We don't need the hotel rooms and the airplane tickets and and flying judges and everybody, parents, chaperones, and everything. We're able to do it now. So it's provided greater access in that there's been some weekends where we have competed in 4 different tournaments at the same time. Some are asynchronous and some are synchronous. So we have some tournaments where students upload the videos and the judges judge the videos, and the student, that's all they need to do. We have some tournaments where every single round is live in person. Not the really almost fun part about this is it's allowed us to get creative. So for instance, at the tournament that we host at the end of January, there was always this niche event that we've always run called radio broadcasting at our tournament. And it's always a tournament where we're focused on, you go in there and you should sit behind the judge. The judge should only be evaluating your vocal tone. Well, this year we just said cameras off. And now there's no choice but to just evaluate their vocal tone. One other really, and this took off in a way that I never anticipated it, was we offered a new event called Children's Literature. And we were able to get speech alum, teachers, coaches from across the country who had their children judge it. So we had children between the ages of 5 and 10 evaluating the students' performances. And all the students were told, you know what, this is for the child audience. So, they got right up in the camera with the book and showed the illustrations. And one of the things that Ann Pointer from Summit mentioned that her students were saying is how many of them shared their favorite book that they had growing up. And when I watched some of the final round videos, it was so clear. But even better were the amount of people that were sending, selfies across, social media of them judging with their children. And how excited the kids got when they got around. So it just added a whole new level of outreach of the importance of the work that we do, because with a 5-year-old, it is not going to be about your suit. And it's not going to be about, your technical ability. It's going to be about who entertained me and who reached me and who told a story that engaged me. And it was I was stunned at how many people signed up for it. I was stunned at how many judges I got for it. It was a blast. So it's this world, of digital competition is not the same. We're fooling ourselves if we suggested that it is. But what we as a community have really found is if you just think a little bit outside that Zoom box, if you will, there's some different things that we can do with this environment that I don't think is going to go away even when we're back in person. And that's going to be the exciting part. That's going to be the renaissance that you talked a little bit about earlier, that I think the event is going to have a whole different feel, a whole different shape, with a lot more opportunities even after we're back in person.
Yeah, that's something I've noted as well, is that I believe that the creative parts of what has been created throughout this pandemic are things that are going to stay. So I like when I'm talking to my teachers and talking to students and they're like, oh, nothing's ever going to be the same. And they're so negative about it. I'm like, yeah, nothing's ever going to be the same. Isn't that cool? Like there's things which are going to be like so versatile, and we've learned so many new skills, and our teachers have been pushed into learning these new skills, and so they're valuable, and something that arts at NJ, no, not the person, no, they're always been valuable. I realized after I said it, I was like, no, I'm talking about the skills are valuable. The person's always been valuable. But arts at NJ, we're pushing SEL, which is social emotional learning, and that is so, it was like at the perfect time, because this is the thing which we will be taking and we need right now so much, but we've always needed. Mm-hmm. And that's just so exciting that you guys had a place, you had a system in place, and you had it ready, and then you improved it, which is so uplifting.
And we're still trying. We're still trying to figure things out. And so it really, the one thing that I always have loved about speech and debate competition is not only the inclusivity, but I think you're right. When I think about the student who, like myself, who was at a high school that didn't have any program like this at all, I think I would have had an easier time going to my administration and saying, all right, here is the program. It is online. No one has to travel to hotels. No one has to invest lots of money. No one has to fundraise, till we're completely fundraised out. But it's something that would benefit, I think, a lot of our schools that currently don't have programs, hopefully can now find avenues to be able to have a program. Because if the only advisor I can get has a family at home that depends on them, and they can't get on a bus or plane or train and, go 6 hours away to a competition, but they can turn on their computer while they're taking care of their family and still be there for their students and provide an avenue for their students to find their voices, to communicate their truths. I think we're going to see that this experience is going to open the doors to many more students, many more teachers, many more programs, to be able to, even dip in a little bit before you, go full throttle into the deep end, but at least to experience everything that both of you have experienced, that keeps you coming back, that keeps you getting on that bus at 7:30 on a Saturday morning and, going up to places like Boston in February. It is something that is absolutely magnetic. And as a community, we have always really come together, supported one another. I have always said there is a seat for every single person at the speech and debate table, no matter what you look like, no matter how you identify, no matter how much money you have in your pocket or not, no matter where you come from, there's always a seat at our table for you. So I look forward to seeing who's going to come to dinner next year, because I hope it's going to be a bigger banquet than ever before.
It's wonderful.
That is so fantastic. Yeah, I keep in touch with the girls I competed with in high school for my school. Back when the pandemic started, we called and we were like, you know what, if this happened in high school, missing school would be sad. But the real sad thing would be not being able to go to speech tournaments. So it's so fantastic to hear in the ways that it's kept going on and even expanded and become more accessible. That's really fantastic to hear.
Absolutely. So, and we're getting to the end of our season now, and we're able to try different things. For instance, every year we've always hosted a memorial tournament in honor of Vincent Borelli, who is a huge friend of the New Jersey Governor's Awards. As a matter of fact, Mr. Borelli was the reason that the New Jersey Speech and Debate League got involved as a partner. And this is going back, 15, maybe almost 20 years ago. And we hold a tournament in his name every year, which funds the scholarships for our state tournament. And over the years, the attendance has been up and down depending on what weekend it is. But this year we decided we're going to do the entire tournament asynchronously. And we're also going to open it up to middle school students, which we've never done before. So now we're able to honor his memory as a theater teacher and speech coach for Long Branch High School. Their auditorium is actually named after him. And we're able to honor him with a whole new audience of middle school competitors as well this year. And the high school students now get to become the judges in addition to the competitors. That would never happen without the pandemic. So it's really going to give us an opportunity. And that's when I think about where are we going to be next year at this time, I could see events like the tournament in honor of Mr. Borelli staying on because it provides a new avenue for us to, number one, fund a very worthwhile cause. But number two, it gives students an opportunity to share their message in a way that is much more schedule conducive. When at the end of marking periods, when you're dealing with standardized tests and everything else, here's an opportunity for students to compete in our activity without having to give up an entire Saturday of work or a Saturday of, helping their families or schoolwork, whatever it may be. So it's really exciting to think about where we're going to be headed after this as well. You're right.
Absolutely.
I know I put this in the outline. I would be really interested to hear a little bit about what your process has been like working with the Ridge team and making the Ridge team as great as it is today, and also the invitational as well. If you have any advice for people maybe from smaller teams. Sorry, that wasn't as well worded as I hoped for it to be.
I love to share this story because I always remember our very first tournament. And the first tournament that Ridge ever competed in was this with a tournament at St. Joe's of the Palisades High School, which I don't believe exists anymore. But it was me and 5 students. And we piled into a car and we had 4 in junior varsity oral interpretation and we had 1 extemper. And we went, and that day was just transformative for us. And it really became a model that I share with a lot of folks, because Ridge didn't have a team when I started teaching there. I literally started the team with those 5 students. And then it started growing and started building. And in 2002, we won our first New Jersey State Championship. Which we've won since then. I still can't believe that when I hear it. And then that evolved into, there was one year that we had like 145 members of the team, which was just, I still don't know what we were thinking at that time. But I would say that over all of those years, I always go back to that original 5. And, many schools can get those 5 kids. What the message that I think parents need to insist upon, as well as students, is that school districts need to invest in an educator to help build the program within the infrastructure of a school. We have too many programs starting now that are literally, one parent and their child, and they're competing for the school. And the schools are not looking to build programs. And I don't know why that is happening. There are a lot of Saturdays, and it's hard to ask, a new teacher moderator, hey, we want you to not only start this program for us, but we want you to give up, Saturdays every month away from your own family in order to do so. We find that many folks that end up doing that end up drinking the Kool-Aid really quickly, and then they can't get enough of it as well. So they start bringing their family to tournaments. But it's really important, I believe, that school districts stand behind their arts organizations, that they support them with staff who are qualified and not just thrown into roles, that they work together with organizations like this, where you have that network. The amount of support that I rely on from other coaches in this state, even during the pandemic, the coaches that run tournaments have been able to gather together in very socially distant and responsible manners, so that we can at least be in a same building working on a tournament together as a group. And by doing that, it has really helped foster a community that are all dedicated to helping this event thrive through this period of terror, of trial. But we know we're going to make our way through this, and it's only by working together. So if we can get schools across the state to recognize the value not only in an extracurricular activity, but in the curricular applications of what we do. We need speech and debate classes in our schools. We need to focus more on, all right, here's one unit in one section of a course that people are going to do a speech. Communication is something which is transcending standardized tests. It transcends the student experience. It works with social emotional learning, because now as a student of communication, you learn how important it is to recognize the audience, to recognize how my words matter, how I can influence others with my actions, my behaviors, my words. And to not only look at it from a character building perspective, but that this is a skill that's going to follow you into those college years, into the workplace environment, and then again, back to your dinner tables. Because the skills that we do transcend classrooms, they transcend boardrooms. It's personal, it's real. It's what we as an activity promote. It's what we want our students to learn. And the coaches, the organizations, we're all here to open the door and welcome you all in. So I really would love one day to see the schools of New Jersey stand behind activities, not only in speech and debate, but in all the arts, and really say, you know what, this is a priority for us. We may not have a section of the newspaper every weekend with scores in it, but what our students are doing now is going to matter well beyond that scoreboard years from now. So everybody within the New Jersey arts community, and this organization is at the forefront of that. And as someone who has always been a friend of this organization and wants to promote it, I thank the Arts Alliance for all the work that they're doing, for the Governor's Awards program, because it really does elevate the work that arts educators do to a level that that forces boards of education and superintendents to sit there and say, yes, this is something we need to invest in. This is something we need to promote. This is what is going to help our students succeed, not just now, not just tomorrow, but decades from now.
Absolutely. So with that, unless Julia has some other questions that she'd love to bring up, I'd like to kind of start, well, I wouldn't like to, but we should start closing down the conversation. And I have a question, but I'd like to open it to Julia beforehand.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't have a question, but I would like to say thank you so much for being on. And also, thank you so much for the support you gave me and my team back when we were in high school, because I was from a new team and a small team. And your advice and also the support from you and other coaches of the bigger New Jersey teams is the reason why we were able to have any success at all. And I've always been really grateful for that.
And it's great. And it doesn't even have to be our team. Just to see new programs start and continue, and alumni coming back and supporting them and caring about them, that's what keeps programs alive in this state.
Absolutely. So I'd like to end it with what advice you have for debaters, for speech makers, for everything. And then if you have any quotes which you recite, or if you have any people that you tell them to look at, or have any characters which you tell them to look at, because my immediate reaction, I'm currently reading To Kill a Mockingbird with the kids in my student teaching class, and all I can think about is Atticus sometimes when some of the things you said. And so I'd love, just what are some connections you make, and what is some of your advice for those students?
The advice I always give my students, really before every single tournament, is A, do your best. B, learn something. C, stay focused. And D, most importantly, have fun. This is an activity which talks about a lot of different issues. You confront a lot of really serious topics in our society. And at the end of the day, when you walk away from that competitive experience, you have to be willing to say, you know what? I enjoyed listening. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed performing. I enjoyed experiencing. And when you do that, then the entire experience is worthwhile. And those are that's the heart of, I think, all arts education. It doesn't stop when the curtain closes or the final downbeat. It is really about what you take with it afterwards. And that has always been the goal. That it's, again, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I say it every year with my students. It's not about this tournament, this round. It is about what a person who listened to you thinks about tomorrow, or thinks about next week, or remembers about you next year. And as long as you planted that seed in a person whom you've never had a conversation with, you've done your job, you've made a difference, you have encompassed everything that this activity is designed for, promotes, and compels all of our students to embrace. So at the end, that's the goal, to make it your own, to make it your own voice, to make it your own truth, not for the trophy. The trophies are collecting dust unless dad's keeping them clean. But it is really about the connections, the friendships that will continue long after this event, your participation in the event will ever stop. Those are the things that matter.
Absolutely. So with that, I'd like to, I'd like to draw attention back to Speak Truth and Change Lives. And then Julia, Mr. Y, do you have any other comments or questions before we close it out?
I just thank you for giving us this avenue to share the work that we do. If there's any schools that are interested in learning about the New Jersey Speech and Debate League, you could go to NJSDL.org. You can always reach out, ridgeforensics.com. You can always find me there. We are here to help any school find out about our activity so that we can invite your students to join into the amazing world of New Jersey speech and debate.
Awesome. Well, with that, I look forward to seeing everyone through their words not next week, but the week after. We'll have another person who will tell us about their lives and their art. And I want to thank Mr. Y. I want to thank Julia for being on tonight. I want to thank the audience for being here with us. And I want everyone to stay safe and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn.